Of course, we cannot begin Week 7 or look back on Week 6 until we remember the key storylines on this very program heading into last weekend. So, Hazmat, quickly remind the people of how Thursday's show concluded.
Maryland beats Ohio State, and I win my confidence picks. I got it on the air.
Since then, Ohio State steamrolled Maryland. I extended my confidence pick winning streak to 6 weeks in a row. Georgia lost to Tennessee, prompting the fire-ricked crowd to wield their torches and pitchforks yet again all over radio and television today. Will Greer has been suspended for PED use. Michigan has pitched a third consecutive shutout. Bob Stoops did in big games what Bob Stoops does. And just in the last hour, Steve Spurrier has announced his retirement effective immediately. And now we will attempt to discuss it all in 30 minutes or less.
Enter Jim McElwain. Now this team believes they can be better offensively. This defense will still have to be elite, but Muschamp told you the next coach will not have a bare cupboard, and he was not lying. But it's amazing because what Florida's doing right now, they weren't that far away to begin with.
Yeah, he did say that. Florida lost Will Greer today. I hope people don't think Florida lost the East today. Because Florida did not lose the East today. Now, they may not go into LSU and win this weekend. They may not have won there with him, period.
Anyway.
But if you think that Florida can't beat Georgia with Trayon Harris, I advise you to look no further back than last season. That program and that team is built on defense first, and it's built on that system that Jim McElwain has. And Trayon Harris is capable of succeeding within that system.
I will not speak of this man. I don't know the man, and I know he's dealing with things personally. What I will say is why everybody's worrying about players not being paid, while everybody's worrying about these players getting yelled at by coaches who have their best interest at heart, you've got an athletic director who sees a coach in trouble at an event, does not do anything about it. They laugh it off, and now it permeates into a season to where he's no longer on the team. You've got decommits everywhere, and you don't know where your team cohesion is. That's the real disservice to players because you got individuals in leadership positions who can't lead these young men where they need to go.
But Pat Hayden, if you're going to tell me that Pat Hayden knew about all this and only acted after there was public outrage, then you understand that's not an effective leader. But also, if Pat Hayden is going to remain ignorant to all this and say, hey, you know what, I didn't even know about all this stuff, then you're telling me that dozens of other people were aware of what was going on in your program and you didn't know. Either way, you're an ineffective leader.
When you have a defense that can pressure the quarterback, whether you throw the ball 50 times a game or whether you try to run the football and give me that play-action pass, it is hard to win against teams that have talent and depth up front. Yes.
Stop blaming coaches and teams for not living up to your false hype. And that goes for fans and that goes for media. A lot of people today beating that fire Mark Richt drum again. Why? And why fire him? Why do fans and media get to define expectations and potential for a team, by the way? The whole thing I've had with Mark Richt is if you didn't get rid of this guy before the 2014 season, when you basically hit the reset button on the program,
right.
2 new coordinators, new strength and conditioning staff, you have a serious upgrade in recruiting. If you didn't get rid of him before 2014, you've got to give him till at least 2016 where you can bear the fruit of that investment that you made in 2013 and 14. LSU and Alabama, and then everybody else is how it really stacks up in the hierarchy of college football right now. Those are championship caliber defenses. They have NFL talent at all 3 levels of the defense. They have the ability to control tempo with an NFL-style run game with multiple future NFL guys on each offensive line. And they are programs that have been there before with coaches and staffs that have been there before, both in college football and the NFL.
I'm sitting here telling you right now there are 2 legitimate teams in the Big Ten. Ohio State, and I'll add Michigan. I've never had Michigan State in the fold. Don't care what they're doing. Don't care what they will do in the future. Ohio State has a great coach, in my opinion, in Urban Meyer, and they have athletes, NFL picks all over the field. And you know what Michigan has? Michigan has Jim Harbaugh and an identity. They know who they are, and they know how they want to play teams, and they do it at the highest level. Those are my 2 teams in the Big Ten. Don't let the Iowas of the world fool you. Don't let the Indianas of the world fool you. Don't let the Michigan States of the world fool you. The Big Ten is too deep. Come on, man.
You know what else Michigan has?
What?
The best head coach in the Big Ten.
Ooh.
That's what Michigan has.
Yeah, you guys.
You remember the day he was hired. I said on this program, Jim Harbaugh will be Urban Meyer's worst nightmare. I wasn't even talking about year 1. I wasn't talking about any season or any game in particular. What I was talking about is what I saw happen in the SEC. I saw Two things happened in the SEC kind of simultaneously. Urban Meyer rose to power at Florida, and then he lost Dan Mullen. And Nick Saban came back to the SEC. And Urban Meyer wasn't in the SEC for very long after that. He went to the Big Ten by way of ESPN. And now he arrives there, and he takes Ohio State back up to prominence, and he achieves everything great, including a national championship. And then he loses his offensive coordinator, Tom Herman. Simultaneously, guess who enters the conference? Jim Harbaugh. Keep an eye on a few people here. Keep an eye on Tom Herman, current head coach at Houston. Keep an eye on Kirby Smart. Those are going to be very hot names here. I believe either of those guys would take that job if offered, and I believe they are very high up on the wish list from people in power at South Carolina.
You knew what the rule was, so what you did is you made the decision to try to get a competitive advantage in a situation to where you knew it wasn't advantageous for you if you got caught. So yes, he deserves to be suspended. You can argue that these things shouldn't be illegal if you want to. That's fine. It's an argument for another day. This is the rule. He deserves the suspension.
The part A of this is, you're right, he does deserve to be suspended because the rule is in place, okay? So I'm not going to address that. That's out of the way. Wilger absolutely deserves to be suspended. He did something wrong by the letter of the law. I want to take issue with what you just said, which is the rule. And I want to tell you how ridiculous this is. Number one, the way this stuff is reported, and that is Will Greer or athlete X, just fill in the blank, tests positive for performance-enhancing drugs. I cannot stress enough how big the umbrella of PED is, because I can't stress enough to you how ridiculously long the list of banned substances is. It's not just cattle steroids being injected into somebody in the late 80s in an Oakland Athletic bathroom, okay? It's not that way anymore. You've got stuff you can buy over the counter, I kid you not, at Walgreens that you test positive for once and you're out a year. And that stuff is legal on the street. It's legal everywhere outside of the realm of sports. And you've got stuff like marijuana that you can test positive for, which is illegal on the streets in most states. And you can test positive for that and somehow get off in most programs with nothing more than a warning, and it's never even made public. Now you explain to me how that makes sense, and then I'll be on board with that ridiculous drug policy that we have, not just in the NCAA, but in Major League Baseball, the NFL, and the NBA as well. I know you guys like Rick. Yes, we do. But if the Georgia job was open, who would you go after for our new head coach? I've got two very quick answers here. Number one is Jim Moore. Number two is Brian Kelly. Period. End of discussion.
Yeah, I like both of those guys. I still like James Franklin. And a lot of people may say that he's not a big-time coach. Well, why isn't he?
This is not who you would put as the Final Four. These are the teams that we think the playoff committee will select as their Final Four as we see it this week. You're first up.
Correct. I think they're going to start off with Ohio State. You've got the defending national champion, and a lot of people put a lot of stock in that. And what they've done is they beat a bad Maryland team, but they showed offensively that they have the opportunity to break out like a lot of people think.
And it really looks backwards. Go ahead and throw it up, Matt. I've got Clemson as the number one team.
Wow.
Because I don't think they're going to lose a game right now. Alabama, I think, will win the SEC, so I have them at number 2. Stanford at 3, and then I put Baylor at 4. And that being said, I'm not a huge believer in Baylor.